Guys, I am on the way to an existing maintenance customer. We're out here to do a heat maintenance. I believe this customer has a 90% carrier gas furnace and the coil and the condenser, straight AC. Guys, nothing major got taken care of here. I think we put in the AC unit here. This had to have been like at least 5 or 6 years ago, minimum. I know he has a high condenser, but guys, nothing major got taken care of with the furnace, at least not to my knowledge off the top of my head. But guys, I'm almost there now. Let's go take a look. I'll see y'all when I get inside.
There it goes. This one is the 58 MCB. Now the 58 series. On these carrier 90%ers, you got the intake collar here. Now, as I mentioned from previous videos, most of these 58 MCB series, the only way to get to this sensor is you gotta remove the collar. Now, with bigger models, I believe with 100,000 plus BTUs, with larger burner boxes, sometimes you can get lucky and you don't have to take out the intake collar. You can just get your stubby or get a longer 1/4 inch nut driver and you can remove the sensor without taking out the collar. But typically with most 58 MCB models, I believe like under 100,000 BTUs, you'll have to remove the collar. And guys, removing these collars are pretty simple. It's just a matter of screws. Now, the biggest thing with checking these collars, which is something you should do anyway if you're doing maintenances, in the summertime, remember this is the intake collar. In the summertime, you can have bees, you can have insects crawl inside this intake collar here. And if you don't check this out and clean it, if this intake collar backs up and blocks up, now you could have issues with the heat. So it takes 2 seconds to remove this here. And typically there should be a screen in here with some models, but so even if you don't have the screen, you can just remove it. And like I said, this one doesn't look too bad. Every year we take this out and we inspect it, but with most, typically you won't know until you remove it. But you always want to make sure your intake is clear. Since this is sealed combustion, sealed combustion means 90%. Furnaces will rely strictly on your intake for fresh air. If that intake gets restricted, then you're gonna have nothing but issues. But guys, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use my 1/4 inch stubby. I'm gonna take that sensor out and clean it. And we're also gonna check the igniter and get what I need. I'll be back. All right, guys. Igniter's only at 53. And take a look at the sensor here. Doesn't look too bad. You see some discolorment in the middle, but we're still gonna take this apart and clean it. And the age of this, just give you some context. What is this? 15 years. Now, this is 15 years old, but the fact that maintenance got done on this unit years prior definitely did help out. So you always got to use the history of maintenance, of course with the age, but if you have a typical 15-year-old unit that hasn't been maintained on the back end, the equipment is going to be more prone to issues versus if maintenance got done on a 15-year-old unit sooner. Typically, the smaller maintenance items will already have been cleaned and or replaced. Therefore, on the back end of a 15-year-old furnace or AC, you're going to have way less issues to deal with. So that's what you're seeing here. I don't think the sensor or the igniter got replaced, but typically, like I said, 53 ohms on that igniter is still within range. If this thing was like closer in the 80s, at that point I would have unhooked it to inspect it, but 53, I looked at the notes from last year, 53 is still pretty good. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean the sensor, and if you see here, the burner box area is clean. We took out the collar. Everything's good to go there. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean the sensor. And remember, this is an ECM blower motor. The only capacitors you have are outside. I believe with all carrier 58 MCB models or 58 MCB, with all all 58 MCBs, they have ECM blowers, so that's one less thing you have to deal with, and the filter is already clean in the unit. But all right, let me clean the sensor. I'll be back. All right, guys, I got the sensor in. Now, another thing with this Carrier 58 NCBs, Linux as well. Linux has the external condensate traps, but another thing, I never really had to preventatively flush 90% Carrier condensate traps. Typically what you'll do in the spring with the AC, you'll check the drains. Your furnace has drains too, but typically with these specific white Carrier condensate traps, I never really had issues, knock on wood. Now, the Linux condensate traps, the external ones, I believe it's like a black rectangle box on the side. Typically, you have to take the plug off that and make sure you don't have any gunk inside the trap. Now, regardless if you are doing Carrier or Linux 90% heat maintenances, you always want to check the condensate drain to make sure you don't see any signs of like blockage. Now, typically with 90% furnaces, if you had a potential blockage in the drain line, you'll either see standing water inside the cabinet, inside the furnace, or you'll see water on the floor. So it will be dead giveaways if the trap or the drain line clogged up or kinked up somewhere. So, but that's something, like say, you'll be able to figure out instantly in regards to these drain lines. But I know we flushed the drains the last time we came out in the spring. Everything's rocking and rolling. And with these particular Carrier inducers, these things run like tanks. I maybe had to replace one or two of these years prior, but I mean, we're talking on like 20-plus-year-old furnaces. Typically under a certain age, you're not going to have issues with these style inducer motors unless there was another underlying issue. Maybe, like I said, the unit wasn't draining properly, and now this inducer motor is running with abnormally large amount of water inside of it. If that's the case, if the furnace is not draining properly, eventually you're going to have more wear and tear on like other parts. But I mean, knock on wood, like I said, if everything's dry, you don't have any signs of like active water leaks, and everything is clean, most importantly, I mean, these inducer motors run like tanks. So, and of course you can inspect the vent line, make sure your exhaust and your intake outside is clean. But yeah, all right, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this back together. I'll be back.